is Griffin.
My tummy hurts.
Green good, red bad. Hey, good evening, guys. Nick with Off the Chart Trading. I'll be doing tonight's video that will be for March 1st. New month, starting today. How fun. It feels like it's been just dragging on, even though it's going pretty quick to think we're already in March, but these markets are like a chop fest, so it just feels like it's been, I guess, every day is kind of bleeding together as far as, over the time we reversed by 500 points. Yeah, that was what, yesterday? No, that was last week and the week before that, and then we dropped that. And anyway, not to go on a tangent, but I'm sure if anybody actively trades, they can attest to this type of price action. I figured we start with the ES mainly just to see where the S&P and everything, how it's all playing out. One thing I noted in my head right before I hit play was that we are still below the 8, starting a new month, obviously today being the new candle for it, that we're still under it. So in a perfect world, because obviously we're building out lower, we get back above the 8, which as of right now is 44.08, and obviously that number will change as time goes on, but mainly just for the concept of getting it back above this magenta line. If you're not familiar with the EMAs or my setup, that's what I'm looking for. So in a perfect world, this candle ends up closing above that magenta purplish line before the end of the month. Obviously it just started, so we still got a long ways, and a lot can happen. We can easily come back down or come down to almost the 21 here, which would be at the moment 40.85. So about a 300 point drop. But let's take a look at the weekly. One thing that caught my attention was we've had some pretty strong reversal candles ever since basically the beginning of the year. We hit the all-time highs, and it's just been downtrending. You can obviously draw a trend line from there and just see that we are in a downtrend. But one thing you don't want to get too, I guess, not comfortable, because there's always like a candle like this that you feel that it's going to save the day, and it might follow through for, a little bit. And then what happens? This candle looks amazing, but we end up having a week or two and then some selling wicks. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. We end up having some selling wicks, and basically meaning that there's a lot of resistance above, and you get 2 weeks of that, and what happens? Boom, flush. We take out this amazing candle. We basically undo it, and what do? New lows. And then obviously so far this candle's not looking too hot, but you don't want to get caught up that maybe even this one does end up closing above 4,400 before the end of the week. Then it's looking great. We're breaking above all the EMAs again, and you think we're going to be off to all-time highs again. And then what happens? That same, stair-stepping lower pattern starts playing out. So that's something to be aware of, that we're by no means out of the woods. We've held up pretty good so far this week and into last week, but it only takes that one day to really have that flush. So just to be careful out there ultimately is the main takeaway. And as I've been saying for many weeks now, you're either looking into the future, meaning like a year plus, or you are scalping, because anything in between, you're definitely getting chopped up. Definitely the NQ not looking as good. One thing I will say, once again, from that same concept, we just looked at the weeklies, there are some buying wicks. However, it doesn't mean much if each candle just ends up, slow stepping lower, and basically each candle closes below the previous one. So I talked about this even during in January, when it started getting a little ugly, was potentially the 21 being support, and so far that has held up. We did pierce it, but I'm more, to me, when it comes to resistance and support, and to me it's not an exact science. It's more of an art when it comes to, how you, kind of like art, like, oh, I think it's this, or, abstract, oh, what do you see, or looking at clouds, or whatever the case may be. When you're looking at that type of stuff, for me, when it comes to it, as long as the candle, it doesn't matter if it's a 5-minute, an hourly, a monthly, like what we're looking at, as long as the candle itself closes above whatever point of reference you're talking of, it's still valid. So that 21 to me is still valid as far as support as of right now. But obviously it's a new month, a new candle, and a lot can happen over the next 30 days. So we'll just have to see how it all pans out. Very similar to the ES as far as how it's all panned out. You have the candle, boom, looks good, and then new lows, and then here we are. So we'll just have to see. I mean, we did go out at the highs of end of last week, which is pretty good from where we were earlier in the week to where we ended up finishing was pretty strong. And then obviously this week just started yesterday. Or technically the week started yesterday and the month started today. But we'll just have to see how this all pans out. One thing I figured the NQ would be stronger today, and I'll talk about that when I switch to my internal screen, give my thoughts on tech in general, because I assumed it would have been stronger today, and I was right probably for the first hour or two. And then I made a comment that, if the Dow, the Russell, and the ES start really seeing some pressure, I don't see the NQ being able to have that big of a divergence, even though at one point I think the Dow was down like 300 and something, 350 points, and the NQ was positive like 50. So that's a pretty big divergence, but I figured if that pressure continued, there'd be no way that I shouldn't say no way, but realistically speaking, there's no way that the NQ would have stayed green, and sure enough, we ended up closing somewhat near the lows of the day. But anyway, that's the NQ. It looks very similar to the ES. I will say overall, it's still probably a little weaker. Overall, the Dow, don't really look at the Dow too much. Oh, that's interesting. I just noticed that candle. We've talked about the Dow and this squeeze for a while. As of right now, that weekly squeeze that it's been in since August of last year is firing short. Now, granted, we still have about today's candle is still going to play out, but I'll just say we have 3 more trading days left, so we'll have to see how this pans out. Obviously, if it's stronger, we get above like 34,000 or something, I doubt this would officially have fired short. But as of right now, it is looking like it is going to fire short. And obviously, none of these charts look that strong. Obviously, a reversal will eventually happen, but you just need to be careful when you do end up seeing these reversals. It's important that you see follow through for more than a day or two. If it's a weekly chart, you got to see more than just 1 week. You can have an amazing candle, but what's the next one doing? What's the next one doing? And, once again, that same type of pattern where you think we're out of the woods, and then boom, not even, 3-4 weeks later, we're back and we're not only retesting, but getting new lows. And obviously the Russell, we'll see. Like I said, this is another squeeze we've talked about. I mean, technically since May, which is crazy, coming up on a year, and it eventually fired short. I guess it depends on what version you're looking at the squeeze, but we'll just say the week of the 17th. And traditionally speaking, you'll see these squeezes play out for about 6 to 8 weeks on average. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So maybe it's coming to an end. Doesn't mean that we magically end up heading higher, but just something to pay attention to. This daily squeeze still has not fired. So that is something to pay attention to as well. You can barely see it. I think it's blue as of today. So we'll see. I personally have a feeling that the Russell will lead us higher if that's ultimately where we go. Who knows? We could have another 2 or 3 days of selling, and then ultimately that squeeze does fire short, and then we're back to where we were a couple weeks ago. We'll just have to see how it all pans out. Let's see what else. That's basically the indexes. As far as support, I will say obviously we got down to the 34, kind of in between, and then starting this month we are below the 21. Not by much though. We're talking like 10 points, so we'll just have to see. Let's take a look at the internals. Overall, as of right now, there was some squeezes into the end of the day. I think the Dow is the only one that has officially fired. Now, it doesn't mean too much. It's 7:40 at night right now, so a lot can happen over the next 12 hours plus. And then I think we have the State of the Union in about an hour or so. So who knows what's said and how the markets will take it. A lot can happen. Maybe he says something that pisses off Putin, and you wake up and it's like, oh, a big bomb just went off, and then the futures are down. ES is down 150 points. You just never know in this market. That's why I recommend you're either a day trader or you're an investor, because anything in between, you're probably going to get destroyed. But I didn't really do too much today as far as the future side. I did take 2 trades. Both were profitable. Nothing too crazy. I think I made like 160, 170 bucks. It was, I just been taking it super light, just kind of getting, kind of hurry up and wait. You're just sitting on your hands waiting for a trending market, because that's typically where I do well. Don't get me wrong. I like the volatility, especially when it comes to futures trading, but in the sense of really my bread and butter has always been as a directional trader and trying to find the right setup and either play it long or short and giving it a couple weeks, at the minimum, and seeing how it plays out. So that style has not worked this entire year. So one thing I will say is that you have to be comfortable adjusting how you trade, because the average person, especially if somebody's only been trading for 2 years, the just buy calls that expire that week and AMC YOLO 8 to the moon stuff is not going to work in these types of markets. And I guarantee people found that real quick, probably the first few weeks. And if there's any of them left, they're slowly catching on that strategy won't work if they still have any money left. So definitely just be careful overall in these markets. But both trades for me were in the NQ today. I played it long. I don't know if it was right out of the gate. And that's the overall strength I was talking about, because the Dow tried the first opening, drive around 9:30 or so. You can see everything else was somewhat weak. And the NQ is actually, and you can tell that easiest way is by the green candles, like red, straight down. And that's one thing that gave me a little pause when I had my NQ trade going on, because I was long, was like, overall weakness in the other indexes. And although there was reasons, and once again, one of them being, I just mentioned it a few minutes ago, was the 10-year is dropping pretty aggressively. I mean, almost like gapping down from here to here to here. So I think it was in the high 16s today. So that would equate to about 1.6 something on the 10-year. And just use it kind of how I use the VIX and the cumulative tick on the far left there, just as inverse plays. The lower the TNX goes, realistically, the higher tech and NQ should go. So I thought that we would see some strength in the NQ, and we did, like I said, probably for the first hour and change. And obviously it got caught up with the rest of the indexes. One thing I do want to show, because the second trade was actually pretty perfect. I went long at 02. So obviously it's not going to be an exact thing, but we'll say right about there, which was like, I think 3 or 4 points, if that, from the lows of the day at that time. And then we actually ended up having a nice reversal for almost a little over an hour. And then obviously we took that low out. But it was a mix of just some decent selling, some low ticks at the bottom of the day, but just a psychological level sometimes of 14,000. Sometimes people don't really put that much emphasis on that type of thing. It's a clean number. A lot of people see that, and that could either be support or resistance depending on what side you're playing. So I figured after having a decent beatdown from being green to being, at the one point I think we were down 200 points or something equivalent, 150 points down here. Once again, a little relief rally doesn't mean it's going to last for days, weeks, and months, but on a 15-minute chart, you get an hour where each candle is higher. And the ultimate thing I mentioned in the room, if anybody was to keep that trade, because I did call it out live, was your biggest thing is, you play it to the 8 and then typically take profits there. Yeah, the next candle did try for the 21, but you can see that it closed like right below it. We did try for the 21, failed, and then we flushed. So once again, these smaller time frames, I was in and out on this one candle. But it was a nice reversal. And like I said, it was as simple as just we had some high ticks. It's not sustainable. We're coming up to a psychological number. And I put it a little above 14,000. That's a trick too. If you have a stop, let's just say I was long, you don't want to put it at exactly 14,000. You'd want to do, maybe 10, 15 points below it. Because algos know that people, view everything that way as far as the round numbers or the whole numbers or just a certain level. So they purposely push, typically with, some decent volume and decent force down, to scoop all of it out, to stop all those people out. And then normally what happens? A reversal. And that's exactly what we saw. It didn't really flush too bad. Like I said, I think I went long at 002, and I think it was 998 or something was the low at this move. So I mean, what's 4 points on a 14,000 point product? So pretty nice trade. Now, one thing I will show you, and I don't know if I've showed it in a different video or not, but people in the room know about it. And since I'm a Marvel fan, I sometimes make up my own patterns, if you will. One thing is that we do in the room, and it does work a good amount of the time, and this will be, I guess, your nugget for this evening, is something I call the Wolverine trade. Now, basically what it is, and it doesn't work all the time, but what you're looking for is, and it could be a reversal play on the opposite side. You can literally put a minus sign and it would flip and it'd be the same thing. So if you're looking to go short, it could work. And if you're looking for a bottom, it could work. And maybe there's an official Japanese candle term for it or whatever. But basically what it is for me is I look for, and I'm just going to use this term. Once again, you can flip what I'm saying if you were looking to go short, but we're going to use this example as going long. you look and it, for a candle like this, basically a decent sized candle. Normally with that comes with a good amount of volume one way or the other, and you're looking for a wick at the bottom of it. So that could have qualified. However, what you look for is the next candle to look about the same, that you're taking out these lows, but what you want is the third candle, and typically you want a candle that looks more like this, where it's a smaller body but has a longer wick. So this wouldn't necessarily qualify because you don't see the reversal in that candle. So I made the decision also, after seeing this kind of pattern play out, is once we got down to here, you're kind of, and the reason I call the Wolverine is, if anybody knows X-Men and stuff, Wolverine, one of the characters, he has his claws. You're looking for 3 wicks. Now, this isn't the cleanest version of it, but each of these candles has a wick. So you have selling, you have more, yet the candle itself closes somewhat, we'll say above the 50% mark. You can eyeball it, saying as long as it closed right above there, basically above this previous one, and then the next candle is typically what you're waiting for, whether you go along here or you wait for confirmation, where not only do you have a little bit of wick where it did try to go lower, but the candle closed above this candle. So once again, you get those 3 wicks. And in the room on Slack, I've taken screenshots of where there's more aggressive wicks where it really looks like claws, and you'll end up seeing that reversal. And it was textbook as far as that's concerned. And once again, I said, if I'm in and out, I caught a good, I think it was like I think I got in at, like I said, 002, and even this candle was a pretty big move. I think I caught like almost 50 points. Maybe I did get out somewhere over here in the following one, but anyway, regardless, I got out somewhere over here. But I said, hey, it did end up forming, and if anybody is long NQ, maybe you don't trade futures, that's fine. If you hear somebody say something, long NQ, do QQQ, trade NDX. There's 3, 4, 5 different ways of trading this type of idea. You don't necessarily have to be a futures trader or have a futures account to play this. People in the room will hear that and typically get Q calls. And once again, I mentioned the 8 as potential resistance on these types of trades. You don't want to overstay your welcome, and that would have been a perfect trade. You get in right near the low, and you get out basically at the high of that move. Yeah, you could have got out of here, but that's all hindsight. You got to stick to a plan. You get in here, you wait for that, and sure enough, that was resistance, and then what happened? We flushed. So anyway, kind of a textbook. So when that kind of works out, I like to show. It doesn't mean, this candle could have looked good, and then this one flushes. You never know, but something to keep an eye on. Like I said, there might be an actual official name for that type of trade. I just call it the Wolverine because that's what I see when I look at it. We have the Black Widow squeeze. You can see almost like the hourglass type look. What is it? 4 candles, basically the same body size. What is it? The Fantastic Four, we call it. Anyway, we have some fun in the room trying to come up with different names for different candle patterns and so forth. But anyway, overall, pretty good. You can't, even though it was a sloppy day, I made money on both trades, technically going long. I also took a trade in Lucid today after the earnings, which to me, they weren't bad. I mean, I can't expect much for a company that just went public coming up on a year ago in July, end of July. So a little more than a little less than a year ago, but they're making big moves, and they slashed their production, which wasn't surprising to me. Was it Bears Workshop or whatever, that one YouTube channel that does the aerial? I think they do it for Tesla as well, where they do the drone flyby to show progress of plants and movement and stuff, and they counted, and it was like, I think at the time, this is going back a couple weeks ago, there was only a few hundred made, and I'm like, there's just no way that we're more than halfway through February and they haven't even finished releasing the Dream Edition. So I'm like, I don't see how they're going to make 20,000, especially with all this stuff. So whether they bit off more than they can chew in this climate, you just say COVID, unprecedented times, and that leads to supply chain issues. And for the most part, people are getting a pass. But I think that supply chain issue, COVID, all those types of buzzwords won't really mean too much going into next year. So if any company tries to use those as excuses, I think they'll get hit a lot harder. But anyway, for that Lucid trade, it was actually pretty good because I think it was basically the bottom of the day I mentioned as a reversal. It got down to, I think, 23, a little below 23.50, but I bought those calls at 23.50, thinking money would come in. It is a heavily strong institutional name. I think 80% of the shares are locked up by institutions. So I assumed it wouldn't completely fall apart. So sure enough, getting long at 23.50 area was really good. I got out, as per usual, a little early, just mainly because it was meant to be a day trade. But if I held it an extra hour or two, it would have been well over 100% return. So that's basically the only two trades I took today. I did do something after hours. We'll finish up on one chart after this, but we are seeing, like I said, a little bit of strength after hours here. It won't really mean too much if something crazy is said in about an hour with the State of the Union, and who knows what can happen while everyone's sleeping. That's why it's like I wake up and the first thing I do is always check the futures, like I'm paranoid. But I will say start of the evening so far so good. We'll just have to see how it all plays out. Let's take a look at. Well, we can take a look at this, and while I switch to the screen, there's no reason to look at the chart itself. We'll end on profile, but what I was going to say, and I was going to pull the chart just for the name itself, but the only thing I did, and I actually did it after hours once I saw that they had earnings, was I added to my Proterra trade. Now, obviously, look into it, but the ticker itself is PTRA. I'll put it as like a hashtag or whatever in the description. Basically, a battery slash, they're making the batteries and the commercial buses and stuff. They're 100% EVs and stuff, and the report wasn't amazing, but it wasn't bad, and I still like the company, so I ended up buying some shares, I think at $6.75, which was pretty close to its all-time low. It did rebound after hours back up to about $7.20 here. So anyway, there's no real reason to look at the chart itself, but take a look at it. It is another one like all these other growth stocks where it went up to $30-$40 end of last year, or I should say going into 2020. And then here we are almost a year later, and just like a lot of these other ones, it's down 60, 70. I think this one's down, 65, 70% from its high, if not more. So I just look at it, the company's good, and I think it's going to be good over the next, or, potentially be big or merge or be bought out or whatever the case may be, quote unquote, as safe as you can get in a growth stock. Obviously you want to buy when it's low, because, you're expecting it to potentially move back up. So anyway, figured I'd mention that name, and then we'll look at the profile here and then and take a wrap. So Friday was really good as far as the profile. We spent the majority of the time and volume at the upper end. You can kind of overlay, I don't know if it's exact, I think it's off by like a tick. Let's see. Yeah, off by like one tick. The most volume was traded, what is that, 43, 68.50 for yesterday, and then one tick below for the day before on Friday. So that's pretty good when you have overlapping VPOCs, and so it basically went out there, which is pretty strong. We did take out the highs. One thing I did make a comment about on this, like I figured as soon as we cleared that and it would take out the high from 218, that 4,400 and so forth would be, pretty easy to get to. I mean, we didn't really break that far. I mean, you're talking a full, 3 ticks above. So not even a full point on the ES. And then what happens? We ended up dropping. We went out, basically overlapping from that, but we did end up towards the end of the day seeing a little bit of weakness. It did rebound, closed above half back, so that was pretty solid. Overnight was pretty strong. I mean, we got up almost basically to 4,400, failed again. That's one thing I do not like, is when you have action overnight, which is basically all this, bluish colors and teal, and that's basically from, I'll round up and I'll say 6 p.m. to 9:30 in the morning. That's all the action that happens overnight. I'm not a huge fan when we open up lower from here. I mean, this is fine. We spent the most time here, so it would have been fine if we opened up in here. But the fact that we opened up down here and we could not get back up here is a little alarming. And on top of that, where did we build out? The lower part of the day. Once again, where all that red and those two green, where the most time was spent and the most volume was spent at the lower end. So it's kind of a B formation, lowercase b. You can kind of see it, which is typically a bearish profile. It's literally flipping this candle. For the reasons I said, this looks good, this looks bad. You start up here, you don't have that much time up here. You break below halfback. Obviously, halfback's after the fact, but you have the most time, most volume at the lower range. The fact that it seems to be around 4,300 is pretty solid. It's kind of crazy. I think that's a 100-point move today, from the highs overnight to the lows, and actually a little below that. But not horrible, but not what you want to see. You would kind of want it to stay within that volume area, those yellow highlighted arrows are. Like if we spend another day here, I think that would have been ultimately more bullish for tomorrow, basically potentially breaking out. Because, just like I said, how the market's reacting and so forth. I think if a lot of people are short every day that goes by that we are not seeing lower prices, I would be worried to stay short. If you get 2-3 days of sideways action, money on the sidelines has to come in, and that's when you could get forced to get out. And that's when you see those short squeezes where, one day we could have, 80, 90 point move on the ES higher. So, like I said, overnight, we're positive right now. It doesn't really mean too much. I think the ES is up about 15 points here. Like I said, just not a huge fan of that. We did take out the lows from here, not by much, and it was towards the end of the day. M periods of the last 30 minutes. So not the best thing, but we did end up having a decent rally into the close. Settlement ends for me on this profile at 4:15, so it's not exactly 4 o'clock, but that's pretty good from the lows to back up there. Still not above half back, but like I said, this isn't the end of the world, but tomorrow's very important. You don't want to start checking down here again, because ultimately if we end up, whether it be tomorrow or the following day, if we end up taking out these lows and stair-stepping lower, I think back on the table is to, retest these lows down here, which ultimately we don't really want to do unless you're short. Anyway, as always, hopefully it's helpful. Check us out at offthecharttrading.com, and you guys have a wonderful night. Take care.